It seems like such a simple question. The question being, are you done working on that piece of software? For many years, I worked with a good friend whose response to this was always the same. He would hold his fingers about 1 centimeter apart and announce, I'm this close. And he was always this close to being done. But even after he felt that he was done with a given feature, was it really done? It depends on what done means. This is why we spend so much time focusing on the definition of done. Now, this is not a formal artifact of the Scrum framework, but it plays such a relevant role in Scrum that we'll address it as part of the core framework itself. The plus sign in the upper right corner will be present for any concept that's part of Scrum, but not necessarily identified as a primary component of it. When talking about the definition of done, there are some terms that come up over and over again. Usable, delivered, deployed, in the customer's hands, or potentially shippable. Every organization's definition of done is going to be a bit different. What's important is to realize that a definition of done is effectively a checklist that we can use to gauge if every single product backlog item is complete and whether or not an increment is done within a sprint. The interesting thing about the definition of done is that finally it gives us an opportunity to get everyone on the same page and agree on what done means. Does it mean that documentation exists? Does it mean, for example, that it's deployed into production? Might it mean that it's deployed simply to a user acceptance testing environment? Or maybe it means that it has a code complexity score and a cyclomatic complexity of under 10. I don't know what your definition of done will contain. But truly healthy Scrum teams expand this definition over time. Maybe today all it means for us to be done is that I've checked into the version control repository. A shared and understood definition of done means there is no ambiguity when we look at the increment of a sprint. We no longer have to ask, how done are you? Because each and every increment stands on its own as being usable and potentially shippable by the product owner, even though it may not have all minimally marketable features present. So we may have good working software that meets the definition of done, but it's still not ready to deliver to the customer. That's very possible, and also likely. It happens all the time. All increments must adhere to the standard set by the definition of done, and we want the definition of done to expand and increase over time. Scrum Masters help development teams take advantage of Scrum's inspect and adapt opportunities to increase the definition of done over time. As the definition of done increases, so does the quality of the software being created. The definition of done must never change in the middle of a sprint. With your fellow teammates, read the scenario on the screen. The final question of this scenario is simply restated like this. Is Bob's feature done? Do we get to say to stakeholders who are interested in the increment that in fact this feature is done and present in the increment? Pause the player and come back after you have consensus on an answer within your team. Welcome back. This is one of those questions that gets a bit tricky, doesn't it? The rules of Scrum clearly state that this increment is not done. However, it seems so wasteful not to be able to ship that increment at the end of the sprint just because of one slight omission of completing some documentation. Or does it? What happens when we don't reach the definition of done on a given product backlog item? We leave a mess that a future developer is going to have to clean up. This leaves debt inside of our product that will have to be paid back at some point in the future. Bypassing an element of the definition of done is unprofessional and should not be allowed by any competent Scrum Master.